Hello, chess friends, and welcome to that of Chess channel, and welcome to a very special tournament that was played recently. It was a bullet tournament, and this bullet tournament was set up like this. Many engines have played in this very nice format, 1+1, so 1 minute on the clock and 1 second increment. And it was sort of a test tournament in which also Lila C0 performed, and I was very interested to see how Lila C0 is performing, because now in the TCEC season 20, Lila is in the lead of the Premier Division of the TCEC season 20. So I was very interested to see how Lila is performing recently, and in this tournament, Lila C0 finished only 1 point behind Stockfish and NUE. So Lila is really upgraded. Lila is really in such great shape. So that's why I wanted to show another great game. But today's game will be, I think, a really cool and attractive game. I just picked one up. I think it had really some beautiful tactical elements. It was Stockfish and NUE versus RUBI. In Bullet, I think Stockfish and NUE is still unbreakable because Stockfish plays in such great ways. And this game is again sort of an irregular opening, but I think this game still has normal ideas for both sides. It has this structure like in the French defense, and you know how Stockfish loves to play against the French. When Stockfish gets some kind of a space advantage, then Stockfish immediately brutalizes its opponent. So as usual in the stop engine games, we have this round one and fight. So d4 played by Stockfish and NUE, and we have now immediately inaccuracy by RUBI, and you know how Stockfish loves inaccuracies. Here e4, simply grabbing some space, and now after e6, knight to c3, d5, and after bishop to d3, knight to f6, and here after move e5, we have reached a similar structure like in the French defense, the advanced variation, or this Steinitz variation. After move knight to d7, we have again, I'm pointing out this directed attack, which means that white is coordinating the attack towards the king side, because the pawn chain is showing us basically the direction. Black, on the other hand, will try and attack here on the queen side, because these pawns are also showing us the direction here for black. So after move knight to d7, we have knight to e2. What Stockfish does here is, after potential c5, we want to have still a protection of the d4 square, because the d4 pawn is our cornerstone of the attack. We don't want to lose it. When we lose it, for instance, then at least we should make something happen here on the king side. We want to be active here. We want to create immediate attacking possibilities. In the game c5, we have c3, and now knight to c6, challenging again the d4 pawn, and now h4 immediately by Stockfish and NUE, which is really incredible. Like in the normal French defense, we want to simply gain some space. We have h5, h6 is here a possibility to split the pawn structure, to weaken the pawn structure here on the king side. Even rook lifts are possible, rook to h3, rook to g3, and still this knight is very flexible. This knight can move to f3, but it can also move to h3, where it can maybe attack here f4, then afterwards maybe even the h5 square. So in the game, queen to a5, RUBI is attacking here the c3 pawn, because there is now the tension. C takes d4, and here bishop to d2 would be probably a passive idea, although it is playable. But here Stockfish and NUE plays a great move, king to f1, and I think we should be really familiar with this king to f1 ideas in the French defense, because the king is perfectly fine here. It's not that black will try to attack now the king in the center, because if you attack the king, you have to play something like f6, and this will happen in the continuation of the game. But still, when you play f6 in order to maybe open somehow the f file, then you're vulnerable yourself to some attacks with queen to h5 idea. So that's why the king on f1 is perfectly fine. We have protected our pawn on d4 because there was this tension here on the long diagonal, but we have also still opportunities to develop our dark square bishop without losing a tempo with the bishop, which is, I think, the most important thing. If we play bishop to d2, then we have played once with the bishop, and then again twice. It's simply loss of tempo. The king is, as I said, perfectly fine here. Queen to b6, attacking further the d4 pawn. We have rook to h3, a great move by Stockfish and NUE, simply sacrificing now the pawn. The problem is now after c takes d4 and c takes d4, knight to d4, and now bishop to e3 is the problem, is winning here immediately for white. So white has to be careful. black has to be careful. If black plays something like bishop to c5 in order to protect, then you get b4 and it's game over. Whatever you take with the bishop or with the queen, you simply lose the knight. The only way to protect it temporarily, it's to move queen to b4, but now after rook to b1, you have to get out of the defense and you lose simply too much decisive material. First we'll take out the knight and we'll continue with a much better position. So that's why after the move rook to h3, it's not possible to take the d4 pawn immediately. That's why Ruby tried here to move f6, but the move f6, again, I'm pointing out, weakens a little bit the light squares in front of the king. You have to be careful. Sometimes in chess it's not so easy to break this pawn chain that white is building in the French defense. You should always consider counterattack possibilities here. Stockfish and NNUE played down to move knight to f4. We have again c takes d4 here by Ruby, and now queen to h5. Now comes the check. Again, what you can do, g6 is not an option because we'll simply play bishop to g6, or even knight to g6 is a possibility. When you take, then we can take out the rook, but it's simply a lost game here for black. So that's why after the move queen to h5, king to e7 was played, and now we have c takes d4, queen to d4, but now here knight to f3. If you try knight to d4, then the problem is now the move rook to e3. You again have some tensions here on the e file. The king is very endangered. If you try f takes e5, you see rook to e5 is here a possibility. Knight to e5, and after queen to e5, we're threatening here a very nice tactic. Knight takes d5 with the fork against the queen and the king. So maybe king to f7 can be played, but again, it's really a bad position. After bishop to e3, I think you again lose some material. After bishop to c5, we can still play our idea rook to c1. It's I think simply too much to handle here for black. Knight to f3 is also pardon me, maybe not knight to f3 because we can also take with the tempo, but maybe knight to h3 and then knight to g5 could be also a nice attacking formation here for white. So after move c takes d4, as I said, queen to d4, knight to d4 doesn't bring you so much. You want to have still the protection around the square e5. In the game, knight to f3, another tempo for Stockfish. We have queen to b4, bishop to d2, again a new tempo against the queen, and here Stockfish sacrifice now another pawn, but it's simply for the initiative. After rook to b1, we have queen takes a2, and Stockfish is now down 3 pawns, which is really incredible. But when it comes to a chess game, the activity is, I think, much more important than material in chess. And you see now also why here 3 pawns are simply not so much, because here you see all of the pieces of Stockfish and NNUE are out. That's the most important thing to realize. These rooks are out, the minor pieces of both of these bishops, both of these knights. The queen is very active. Still, you cannot kick away again the queen. Knight to g6 will happen. So it's such a great attacking formation that Stockfish has built here. After the move queen takes a2, we have bishop to c3, and now queen to a3. Again, if you try f takes e5 or similar stuff, we'll simply take knight takes e5 here as for trades of pieces, queen to e5, and again we have some threats. If you, for instance, try to go with your queen back, maybe something like queen to d8 to get some kind of a defender in front of the king, then again you get a very nice tactic. Knight to e6 would be very tricky, because after bishop to e6, rook to b7, and followed with something like bishop to f5, rook to e3, it's again game over here for black. You cannot protect anymore your bishop. So really wild stuff what Stockfish is preparing here. After the move bishop to c3, we have queen to a3, and now knight to d4. We have f takes e5, but now knight to c6, b takes c6, and now we have the move bishop to b4. And in this position, Stockfish has really a decisive advantage. Black has to give up the queen. The queen is trapped, which is really incredible. The queen played so many times in this game. Stockfish simply gave up all of the pawns and had now really nice game here. After queen to b4, rook to b4, of course, queen f takes e takes f4, rook to f4, king to d6, and now rook to e3, attacking also the weakness on e6. We have bishop to e7. Finally, Ruby is trying to develop the minor pieces, but it's simply too late. There's simply too much going on now against king. Again, we have queen to g4, attacking the weakness on e6. We have knight to f6, queen to g5, threatening now the move queen to queen to e5, we have c5, and now bishop to c2, retreating with the bishop. We have knight to e4, queen takes g7, a very important move, a tempo against the rook, bishop to b7, and now another great sacrifice, rook takes e4, d takes e4, bishop to e4, bishop takes, rook takes, and we have now reached an endgame stage in which white is much better. White has, of course, the queen for a rook and the bishop, and although black has one pawn up, but all of these pawns are simply weaknesses. They're isolated. An isolated pawn is, of course, a weakness in the continuation of the game. So still the king is endangered. That's why it's a much better position here for white. So rook from h to d8, we have rook to e1, rook to b8, and now h5, simply proceeding with our pawns. Rook to b4, g3, rook to f8. We can take out now this pawn, queen takes h7, bishop to f6, queen to h6, attacking here the bishop. Rook to f7, and now king to g2, here queen to e3, again building this battery. You have to play e5, but now this rook again can be remaneuvered, again attacking a new isolated pawn. So you see how many troubles you get when you get your isolated pawns on the board. Here you have to defend this, but now after queen to b5, we're threatening also some queen to b6 ideas. So that's why king to d8, king to e7, we have queen to b6 attacking the rook, and now we can grab this pawn here. We can grab this pawn. You see the isolated pawns are off the board. Queen to c5, the rook is pinned. We have rook to a8 getting behind with our rook, queen to c4, king to e5, again queen to c1. But there are really many great moves that you can play because it's a lost position simply for black. Rook to d8, we have again new check. Now queen to c4 again. Queen takes e4, again stockfish takes another isolated pawn. Really mad stockfish here. We have king to f7, queen to f5, here simply pushing the pawn further. Rook to a7, rook to d7, and now after trades of pieces, here stockfish simply took out the bishop on h8, and it was over in a couple more moves. So great attack. I decided to show you this one because I think it had really great tactical elements in similar structures like in the French defense. It wasn't maybe the most accurate game here by black, but great tactics again by Stockfish and NUE. I wanted to follow this tournament. As I said, it was a bullet test tournament, so Lila C0 finished on the second place in this tournament. Stockfish and NUE won the tournament, but Lila C0 only was 1 point behind Stockfish and NUE, and Lila is now in the lead, as I said, in the TCEC Season 20 Premier Division. So it will be again such a great battle. I wanted to also see how these engines are performing in this fast time format, of course, in some bullet chess. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Great attack again by the fish. If you want to see more attacking brilliances like this, check out my commented chess games played by computer series. Here's the link. And if you want to see the humans battling in their best chess games, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.